Larry Galehouse and Travis Walbeck. Larry, of course, from the National Center, Travis from West Virginia DOT, talking about the Pavement Preservation Expert Task Force. Here's Larry Galehouse.
Well, good afternoon. Real happy to talk with you this afternoon. We'll get started with this, and I want to tell you about the Pavement Preservation Emulsion Task Force. And this is under the auspices of this group, the TSP2, and it's been going on for a few years. The whole purpose is quite simple, and that is to put the things that we do into the AASHTO spec book. And so never before have all of the emulsion treatments out there been put into an AASHTO specification. And the purpose of this is really to help out the agencies, and whether they're state or local or wherever, to really get the better specification, so to speak, of these treatments that we're doing. So what's a mandate? Well, a mandate is something that's going to be unique because we're trying to take the current emulsion specifications and put them into a surface performance graded category, much like we did with the performance graded binders years ago. We're looking at taking the emulsions and put them into a surface performance grade. That's one of the main mandates, and that's one of the big challenges ahead of us. But also to develop performance-based specifications for design, construction, and construction guidance specs. We have a number of specs done in the materials area and design area, but Travis we're tag teaming this. He's going to cover a little bit more on how the whole process works, because to get these in the AASHTO specification book, it's not an easy thing. It takes a big commitment of time, and a lot of people are involved. And then we want to encourage use of these uniform specs, and that's what these groups are all about, the partnerships, because we want to introduce you to those specifications that are out there. One of the things I want to explain to you, and this is a little confusing, how does AASHTO identify whether they're their standard specifications or provisional? And you can see the abbreviations here. You have the M, those are the material specs. You have the T for the tests, and then you have the R for the basically design practice. If you see a P, that means provisional, and they can be a provisional up to about 8 years. And if they're not used, then they're scrap. But if they are used and fully embraced, then they become a full standard. So with that, it's just something that I wanted to give you a little idea of what goes on. Now let's talk about some of the achievements so far. The emulsion standards have been updated, and we're talking about the M140, and that's on the anionic emulsions. The cationic emulsions are 208, and then the polymer modified emulsions are M316. When you're writing your specification, you can just refer to these, because that spells out what has to be in that emulsion. Also, these are the particular asphalt emulsion treatments that have already gone through the long process, and it is a long process. And you can see the material specs and the design practices out there. The scrub seal materials has not been approved quite yet. Now, there's a third part, and I'm going to have Travis explain that, and those are the design or the construction guidance specifications. And there's going to be some changes, hopefully made within AASHTO, so there'll be these construction guidance specifications, but we will not know that until next week and when they have the spring AASHTO meeting. But at least we have these right now out there for your use. And also in your packet, you'll see a sheet, and the approved specifications are printed up on this sheet, so when you leave here, at least you have reference to what specifications are available right now. The membership of the Emulsion Task Force, we have co-chairs here. Colin Franco from Rhode Island, Chris Lubers, and those two gentlemen are not only knowledgeable, but they crack the whip and they get things done, and that's what we need to have happen. These specifications do have to be rolled out. I say we have members from industry because there's a lot of people, and we can't mention them all because there's just so many. But the academic, and you see we have Chico State University, and then we also have Colorado State University, and NC State, and Texas A&M. And then these are the 4 states that I can tell you we have right now, but there are more states that come in and out of the meetings. Of course, the National Center is there. We have AASHTO Resource. They're the ones that accredit the laboratories around the country. And then Federal Highways involved. We also have Asphalt Institute involved. There's a number of groups that are involved in developing these specifications. It's very important. We have specifications right now that are in the hopper, and these are up for review of the entire Committee on Materials. And they're not yet approved, but they're currently in the hopper. And they're tack coats, scrub seals, and then the cold mixes, whether the virgin, the recycled, or the cold in-place recycling. We're also looking at these specifications to be developed, and that's on rejuvenators, and then the foam asphalt stabilization, and then the Nova chip, what we would call the bonded surface treatments. So those are all very important that have to be developed at probably will begin at the next meeting. The next meeting is going to be at the Heritage Center in Indianapolis, and that will be on June 20th and 21st. So it's not that far away. Interested people can attend that. I think everybody has a stake in the game at this point, so if a person wants to attend, you're more than welcome. These are open meetings. The big elephant in the room is number 1 there, and that's to develop this surface performance grade specification. And right now we have a lot of industry folks involved. There's a lot of round-robin testing going on. We're taking residual samples and sending them in to be categorized and so on. The next big elephant is this whole idea of quality assurance. We're starting out with a quality assurance specification for chip seal, and then we're going to move into micro surfacing, because that's the one part that we tend to leave out of all of the things we're talking about for surface treatments, and that's the whole aspect of quality assurance. Because quality assurance is really the 3 things. It has to do with a quality control plan, quality acceptance, and independent assurance. And all 3 of those have to be fully implemented in order to have success on these projects day in and day out. And you all heard all of the discussion about, setting targets and long-term plan or long-range plans and so on. In order for that to be successful, we cannot have failures out on the grade. Every one of these treatments have to work, and they have to work well in order to be successful. So that's what's so important about all of this. And then also studies, because there has not been enough done as far as the emulsified asphalts, as far as open studies. We need more research in that area, and those are updates that can also be put into the preservation roadmap. Got a little ahead of myself, but let's talk a little bit about these quality assurance protocols, because I mentioned the first 3. That's the acceptance testing, the quality control, and independent assurance. But along with that goes this whole idea of equipment calibration. It has to do with the whole construction process. We're not doing a very good job as a nation on making sure that that equipment is calibrated before it goes out on the grade. It's got to be calibrated, because we can't expect the treatments to work well, any more than we can expect the treatments to work well if we don't check the residual asphalt in the emulsions, because it's a competitive world out there, and if we think we're getting a 62% residue and instead you're only getting a 56% residue, somebody's making a good profit selling brown water. So we've really got to make sure that you're getting what you expect. Also, we need the education and the training. That's important, because we do have free online training through ISSA. NHI offers some training, TC3 offers some training, and then the National Center offers training. And then also we need to bring our workforce, we need to raise the bar. We've got to have certification, and we've got to have it for the contractors and the agencies. One of the places that I forgot to talk about is ISSA puts together a workshop each year, and it's a week long. And they go through in detail about the different treatments, the emulsion-based treatments that are used in preservation. It's an excellent training program. So with that, I just wanted to give you an update. Make sure you take that sheet and you look at it, and please utilize those specifications. And now I'm going to turn it over to Travis, and he's going to tell you everything that's involved in just trying to get a specification through the AASHTO system, because it's fairly involved.
Found out we were going to do a handoff. I figured we better get a graphic for a handoff, right? Really, this is an update on what's going on with the AASHTO Technical Subcommittee 5b, presentation by Derek Niener, planner, right? So instead you got me, Travis. I'm Travis Walbeck from West Virginia. I'm also second string, right? So this is actually Derek's presentation that I've morphed into my style. So we'll get kicking on that. So basically we're going to talk about section on materials, the SOM. We're going to review some updates that's happening through AASHTO there. We're going to talk about what this comp is. And then we're going to get into more about the technical subcommittee and the standards and future work, etc. The subcommittee on materials has been around for a long time, and they publish all those standards. They publish the test methods, they publish the materials, you know, what our emulsions need to be, what our aggregates need to be, etc. And I believe the majority of us all reference those standards in our specifications, whether they're printed ones or they're special revisions, etc. So they maintain both the construction and maintenance materials standards, and then they also get into the testing and the sampling of those materials as well. Larry worked through this before about the whole idea of what's a material spec and what's a recommended practice and what's a test method. And then this doesn't have the provisional in there, but that's built into that whole setup. So currently there's 522 standard specs that are published through this AASHTO group there. And then this graphic kind of gives you an idea of how it works. It rotates through every 4 years. A specification is up for renewal, and the group goes through it. They decide if there's any changes that are needed. They decide if anybody's using it. If nobody's using it, there's typically not any comments on it. And so we work through it at that point. The technical subcommittee votes on it, they hash it out. We sit in rooms for a couple hours and talk about what standards need what updates. We talk about it through webinars, we talk about it on phone calls, et cetera, to try to get that figured out to move forward. So those AASHTO standards have moved from being printed in a book annually to only being available digitally. So I know in West Virginia we use a standards clearinghouse that we pay a subscription to, so we have access to all the AASHTOs and all the STMs that we would need. I think you can get a subscription through AASHTO themselves to buy it that way. So there's several ways that you can still get those digital standards. You can go on AASHTO's website and buy one at a time. If you only care about the R56 test standard, you can go just buy that one. So that rolling ballot, what I was talking about, every 4 years they roll up so that we can discuss them and find out what's going on in the field. If there's adjustments of things that are not really being done in the field, then maybe they don't need to be in the standard. You know, if one state's really using it and they feel strongly about it, they can discuss that with other states that are not using it. In fact, in my short time in transportation world and dealing with this, I've seen split votes that are not unanimous votes on a standard, and somebody left the room disappointed with how the standard ended up being. So it happens. We're working hard to try to improve our links with the TRB committees so that we are talking with those academia experts on what they're seeing and what research they're doing to make sure that we're molding these things together so that we have a good interconnectivity between them. And then the meetings for the section on materials are held typically in August. I figured I'd show you a little sunshine there. We were in Phoenix last year, so that was awful fun. I grew up in southern Utah. It was fun to take the West Virginia folks there and expose them to some 115-degree weather. They had never seen that. So that was a lot of fun for me. So the SOM is reorganizing. There's been a lot of discussion about how this joint technical group on pavements and how the subcommittee on materials should be working together and how that works out. So they have created this committee on materials and pavements. So the SOM is retiring. Essentially, we're taking those two groups, pushing them together, and it's going to now be the comp. So if you saw the comp earlier and we're wondering what the comp is, that is the Committee on Materials and Pavements. So each state agency has one voting member and up to 3 other members that are there that can go through these standards, very much like we just talked about with the materials, but now we're going to add some of those pavement things into those meetings. Through that, the comp is restructured a little bit, so there's been some consolidation of some of the technical sections, and then there's been a new one that was created here a little over a year ago, and that's the 5B. It's the technical section on bridge and pavement preservation. Sorry, you can see where it's listed down there in the bottom. That's where it kind of fits in the hierarchy. And I know there's several people in here that are on other committees. In fact, we have chairs of some of these committees that are here that are involved in that side as well. So it's something that really does get around. There ends up being 19 of those technical sections in the comp, and an executive council, and then the AASHTO Administrative Task Force that helps us administer things. And those are the folks that do the heavy lifting during the week when the rest of us are doing our other jobs. Again, the annual meeting is in October. This year we're going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio, so come visit. If that works out for you, come see how things are happening there. People are welcome to attend that. I do want to note, I think it's kind of cool that they took this picture to advertise Cincinnati's event there from Kentucky, right? They took it from Kentucky. So with our Kentucky friends here, I thought that'd be notable. So friends of the subcommittee on materials. Well, it's the comp now, right? It's no longer the SOM friends, now it's the comp friends. And who is that? That's folks from industry, the trade associations, academia, and so forth. And you know, we are interested in the perspective from those people. You know, they're experts as well. So we do want to hear from them. They're non-voting members, so they're not able to vote on the actual specifications themselves, but they have a seat at the table. Well, not really at the table. They get to sit in the back. But we do listen to them, right? We do listen. We have discussions. I know Larry had quite a nice discussion there last year, that, you know, able to talk about things that were important to IGGA and those standards. And we do want to hear that. We do want to listen to those perspectives. So we really rely on those friends of the comp to be, experts and give us feedback there. So if you're interested in being a friend of the comp, then talk to Derek, or you can talk to the second string if you want, the bench warmer, right? And we can get you information on what you need to do to be involved if you'd like to be involved on that end. So when the balloting happens, we do have some votes of just the technical section there at the meetings, but then we need to carry that on to the full body, right? So with each state only having one voting member, that voting member needs to rely on the other experts in their state to give them advice. So after it passes the subcommittee, then it has to go to the full body there. So that's all done online through the AASHTO website. Honestly, it's a little hairy getting through sometimes, but nonetheless, that's how the voting is actually done. So all the technical sections have mid-year webinars. Typically, they're scheduled between November and February. 5B is really early, so we were done before Christmas with all the mid-year stuff that we needed to do, which was kind of fun because we met in in August, and then we were done before Christmas with our whole next round of discussions there. So it gives us an opportunity to hash out some of these things before we're all in person, so we can use that time more valuably when we're there in person, and it helps us get through that balloting process. The new technical section that was just created here, like I said about a year and a half ago, is now the comp technical section 5B, so preservation or bridge and pavement preservation is what it is. So why was this new section created? Well, there was quite a few of these standards that really didn't fit well into the other groups, right? Some of them fit into the aggregate materials, some fit into emulsion materials, some were in the markings and coatings, but there was kind of a real mixed bag of where these preservation standards lived. in there, and really it was determined that, a lot of these preservation standards are systems. They're not standalone things. A microsurfacing has to have the aggregate in there. It has to have those different things gathered in there. So really, where they're systems, they can't be divided and separated out. And then preservation is really gaining a lot of traction nationwide. It really is. There's a lot of us that are out there singing preservation songs all the time, pushing that. And so to have a home for those really works out well, so that we can have the right people looking at those standards together to help push those forward. And a lot of the reason it's gained attraction is from things like this group, this body here, and the way we're able to come together and discuss what each state's doing, what's working for people and what's not working for people, et cetera. And it gives us the chance to throw that mantra out there that the right road, right treatment, right time, right? And that's gotten to the point that at these groups, and we all must plug our ears because we're tired of hearing it, but yet we still need to sing that to folks that don't understand all the way yet. So the new technical section was actually, it was the fall of 16 when it was put together. Here's the discussion. It says the technical section will publish the standards relating to bridge and pavement preservation not sufficiently covered in other sections. The technical section will be responsible for related standards, which could include but are not limited to chip seals and crack seals and microsurfaces and high friction surface treatment, now lives in there, concrete sealers, etc. So that's kind of that's the quote of really how it works. So at least the leadership group of that right now, Derek's the chair, and I promise you he does the heavy lifting. I keep asking him what he wants me to do, and he says, hey, I'll let you know later, and then everything gets done. So I'm the vice chair, and we have Morgan Kessler from the Federal Highways, and a couple liaisons there from AASHTO that help us with that on that end. So here's a list of the approved standards that actually are in Technical Section 5b. You can see some of them are a little older because that last two digits on the number there's the last year that they were approved. So there's some that were in 16, some in 17. So these 18 ones are the first ones that went through our group, through a full cycle with our group. And almost all the ones are on there that we were doing. Like Larry had mentioned, we've got the scrub seal emulsion specification. It ran into some further discussions and some things that were going on there. So we expect that one will be published out in 19 once we can hash out a few more of those details. So what can you do? How can you guys help? We do want your help. We want involvement. Talk to your comp representative, whoever that may be. Let them know, what things need to happen there, where a standard might be broken for your state or your agency, and provide your feedback. We could use that. The other thing, just like Larry mentioned earlier, use the standards. Specify them. Put them into your specifications to say, hey, it needs to be according to this. Even if it's a provisional, it needs to be in accordance with this standard. And if they're being used, then we can find out where things aren't working. We can find out where things are working really well and providing us the results that we wanted. So using those standards becomes very important. Like Larry had mentioned, it takes 8 years, or it could take up to 8 years for a standard to become a full standard through that provisional process. But if West Virginia creates it because we're using Rice Krispies for our chip seals and it's working really well and nobody else uses it, it will die, right? That's the way it works. After 8 years, it can no longer be a provisional. It needs to either be a full standard or it goes away. So using them becomes very important at that point. And then there's this whole idea of the construction specifications. And what about those construction specifications? The section on materials didn't handle those, but now with the comp, at least the framework of what the comp has built off of has never done construction standards either. So those construction standards were actually done by the Committee on Construction, but they only publish every 5 to 10 years. And Lindy's shaking her head, not even that often. Sometimes there's been a large gap in the amount of time that those construction standards have been, or those construction specifications have been published, and that kind of needs to change. Now, last year, the Committee on Maintenance actually passed a resolution that said, we own all the preservation standards. We're going to publish them. But one of the things that was kind of troublesome about that is they don't have a publishing infrastructure like the materials side did. So the materials publishes annually with that whole system that they have worked out, and the other two groups have not, they don't publish that same way. So here's this whole resolution that was brought up that basically says, hey, we want to take the section on materials and pavements, which is kind of this new pushed together group, and we want to give them the construction guidance, but we want help. We don't want to do it in a vacuum. We need people from maintenance, we need people from construction to come and be on that committee. So the way it's written out there is that 3 to 5 representatives from each of those groups needs to come and be involved in that comp, so we can get that boots on the ground perspective instead of only looking at the lab side there. So, and that's set up right away for a 5-year period. And I think, Larry, am I mistaken? I'm reading between the lines there that that's to make sure that it's going to work that way.
That's right.
Yeah, so that we can make sure that it's going to work fine that way, and then they can reevaluate it later. So this resolution is set to be voted on next week. So we're all hoping it passes. I haven't heard anything that would lead me to believe otherwise. So we're seeing that, and when it does pass, then that process starts immediately, and those construction standards will come into the comp group, and we will start working on those just like we have with the material standards themselves. So that means the summer of 18, we'll be reading through those construction standards. We'll be working through what changes need to be made or what things we like about them, putting them into our format, and working through that publishing process. One of the things Larry and I talked about earlier that's going to be interesting and challenging for that group is a lot of these materials folks want everything to be perfect in that specification. Every letter and every number has got to be right there, and some of this construction stuff needs to be a little more touch feel, and how's it going to work? So that's going to be a challenge for us as we move through that. So these documents will be published in the same format as the materials specifications are. They'll just be construction standards instead, and they'll come out with that materials book, which is all digital, but they'll come out with that group of standards there. So these documents will be called construction specifications, and they'll come out through the construction guide. So the material stuff will come in the materials book, and there's going to be this AASHTO construction guide that comes from the same group of people, but it's more that recommendations for in the field.
Let me add one component to that, Travis, just because I've worked closely with this idea that we're going to join construction, materials, and maintenance together is really new, and it's the whole reason kind of that AASHTO reorganized. They wanted these groups to start kind of crossing these lines and working with each other to bring all the best minds together to produce the best products possible. That being said, Technical Subcommittee 5b will also now be composed of not only materials members, but also members from the construction committee and members from the maintenance committee. So maintenance folks will have representatives on Technical Subcommittee 5b, and so will construction. I want to make that clear.
Might want to tell them how long it normally takes, then, because you got to have 2/3.
Okay, Larry's mentioning that that it takes some time to work through that because you have to have 2/3 of the technical section, right? All the members vote to have it be made there. So Lindy and Larry have dealt with it a whole lot more than I have. So
The process, once it comes out of the technical session, then it has to go before the full body, as you said, but that requires comments, and every comment, regardless what the comment is, has to be addressed. No matter how silly the comment may appear, there's got to be addressed. And then once all of those comments are addressed, then the changes are made to whatever the proposal is, the standard, then at that time it has to have a 2/3 majority of all of the voting states. So, I mean, it's a process. So these things that we're putting out there, please use them, because they've undergone a lot of scrutiny, and they're good to use. If you don't use them, they're going to disappear.
I hope that substitution worked out okay without Derek here. So that's what we have. John?
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.